All right, folks, get ready to dive deep. We've got a mountain of information here about content marketing and data privacy. Articles, research, you even threw a final exam in the mix.
Had to make sure you were paying attention.
Oh, I definitely am.
Yeah.
Especially since we're talking about that tricky intersection of creating captivating content and, making sure we respect user privacy. It's a pretty hot topic these days.
It really is. It's a tightrope walk for sure, especially with the way the whole digital landscape is changing, like with Web3. And the rules are constantly changing too.
Oh, absolutely. Speaking of changing, we've got some amazing stories here about how companies like Instagram and Yelp completely transformed their business by really paying attention to what their users were doing online. Like, seriously, they pivoted their entire model.
Yeah, those stories are like master classes in understanding user behavior and using it to drive innovation.
Exactly. But before we jump into all that, let's do a quick recap of the basics. What is content marketing? And more importantly, why should anyone care?
Great question. Well, at its core, content marketing is all about giving people valuable information that speaks to them, that attracts and engages a very specific audience.
Okay, so it's not just about blasting out a message to the masses.
Not at all. It's about building trust over time. Like, think about it, you're more likely to trust a friend who's always got great advice.
Right, that's true. You want that friend who's always got the inside scoop, the one you can always count on.
Exactly. And that's the kind of relationship you want to build with your audience through content marketing. You want to be the go-to source, the trusted expert, especially in today's digital world where everyone's bombarded with ads.
Ugh, tell me about it. It's like you can't even browse the internet without being chased by ads.
Right. Content marketing helps cut through that noise. Instead of interrupting people with ads, you're drawing them in with something they actually want.
So it's less about shouting, more about whispering, but in a way that really connects.
Exactly. It's a more subtle approach, but it can be incredibly effective. The research actually shows that it builds trust, drives organic traffic, improves customer retention, the whole 9 yards.
It's interesting in this final exam you gave us that there's a really specific definition of content marketing. It says it's a strategic approach focused on creating and distributing valuable and relevant content to attract and engage a specific audience to drive profitable customer action. That last part really stood out to me. It's not just about creating content just for the sake of it, right?
Absolutely. It's definitely got to have a purpose. You want people to take action. But that action doesn't always have to be an immediate sale. It could be signing up for your newsletter, downloading a resource, or even just spending more time on your website.
So it's about moving people through the sales funnel, but maybe in a more gentle, less pushy way.
Exactly. It's about nurturing those relationships and letting them unfold naturally. And content marketing isn't limited to just one format. We're talking blogs, videos, infographics, social media, you name it.
So many options. It makes me think about the big difference between content marketing and, traditional advertising. Because they're totally different beasts.
Totally different. Traditional advertising is all about interruption, right? You're buying space to shove your message in people's faces, whether they want to see it or not.
Whereas content marketing is about attracting them, piquing their interest.
Exactly. It's like
Yeah.
the difference between being a door-to-door salesperson and hosting a really awesome party that everyone wants to attend.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
And speaking of parties, or maybe more like a library full of useful information, there are a bunch of reasons why content marketing is super important in today's digital world. It's not just about building trust, right?
Right. For starters, it's a fantastic way to get people to visit your website without having to spend a ton of money on ads. Search engines love fresh, relevant content, and that can boost your ranking and visibility.
So it's like laying out a trail of breadcrumbs that leads people straight to you.
Exactly. Plus, great content helps you keep your existing customers engaged and coming back for more. If you're constantly giving them valuable stuff and connecting with them on a deeper level, they're more likely to stick around.
It's like building a community, not just a customer base.
Exactly. And let's not forget, the bottom line, content marketing can be very budget-friendly compared to traditional advertising. It's a smart way to maximize your ROI.
So it's good for your brand, good for your customers, and good for your wallet. Sounds like a win-win-win to me.
It really is. Plus, content marketing can help you become a thought leader in your industry.
So it's not just about selling a product or service. It's about sharing your expertise and shaping the conversation.
Exactly. It's about building a reputation as a trusted authority, someone people look to for information and insights.
That's awesome. And it seems like content marketing is super adaptable too.
It totally is. It's all about being responsive to how people are behaving online, how they're searching for information, and what they're interested in. It lets you stay ahead of the curve and connect with your audience on their terms.
So we've established that content marketing is like the secret sauce for success in the digital world.
Mm.
But the world is constantly changing, right? What are some of the new trends we should be aware of?
Oh, there are some exciting things happening. Have you heard much about AI-driven content personalization?
I have. It's kind of mind-blowing, the idea that we could tailor content to each individual's preferences. Imagine creating content that feels like it was written just for you.
That's the goal. AI is making it possible to create incredibly targeted experiences. Of course, we'll talk more about data privacy later, but the potential is undeniable.
It's like having a personal shopper for information.
I love that. And speaking of standing out, the research also mentions this trend towards niche content and thought leadership.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Mm.
In a world overflowing with content, you've got to offer something truly unique.
It's all about becoming a specialist, a go-to expert in your niche. You're not trying to please everyone, just the people who are truly interested in what you have to offer.
So instead of being a jack of all trades, you're mastering one.
Exactly. And that mastery is what builds trust and credibility.
It's like finding that hidden gem, that blog or podcast that speaks directly to you.
That's the feeling we're going for. But it's not just about the content itself, it's about the entire experience. The materials talk about crafting these seamless user journeys.
So it's not enough to have great content. You need to make it easy and enjoyable to consume.
Right. Think optimizing for mobile, making sure your website loads quickly, using visuals to break up text, those kinds of things.
It's like creating a digital space that people actually want to hang out in.
Exactly. And of course, we can't forget video and interactive content. Those are huge trends right now.
For sure. Who doesn't love a good video? Or a fun
Oh.
quiz?
They're so engaging. Plus, they align perfectly with the way people consume information today, especially younger audiences. It's all about snappy content that captures attention quickly.
Snackable content.
Yeah.
I love that. And while we're on the topic of efficiency, the sources also talk about the importance of repurposing content.
Ah, yes. It's about working smarter, not harder. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. Take a blog post and turn it into a video, then pull some quotes and create social media posts.
It's like getting multiple outfits out of one piece of clothing.
Exactly. Maximize that content.
Speaking of reaching a wider audience, the sources talk about deepening those partnerships with content creators.
It's about moving beyond just a simple sponsored post, you know? It's about finding creators who genuinely align with your brand and collaborating on something authentic.
So it feels more like a genuine recommendation from a friend, not just a paid advertisement.
Precisely. Authenticity is key.
Makes sense. And finally, I noticed a really interesting shift in how the materials talk about content marketing. It's not just about addressing customer pain points anymore, but about tapping into their aspirations.
It's about connecting on a deeper level, appealing to their emotions and dreams.
So it's not just about solving problems anymore, it's about inspiring people.
Exactly. It's a much more nuanced approach, and I think it's really exciting.
So to recap, we've covered a lot of ground here: the basics of content marketing, how it stacks up against traditional advertising, and some of the exciting trends that are shaking things up.
We've only just scratched the surface.
And speaking of scratching the surface, up next we'll be exploring the evolution of the internet, from Web 1 to Web 3, and what it all means for both creators and consumers. Okay, so we've talked about how content marketing is always changing, but the internet itself is changing too, right? Like the whole way we experience the web has gone through some pretty major shifts over the years.
It has. It's really fascinating to look back and see how we went from Web 1 to where we are now.
Totally. So let's take that trip down memory lane. Web 1, the good old days, right?
Well, good in some ways. It was like the very first introduction to the online world. Think static websites, not much interaction. It was very much about the companies presenting their products, a bit like a digital brochure.
The internet before social media took over.
Exactly. It was definitely a simpler time, but also pretty limited in terms of what users could do.
Then came Web 2, the internet we all know and sometimes love. Suddenly, everything became interactive. People could create their own content, share their thoughts and experiences, connect with others. There's a huge shift.
It was. Social media platforms exploded, blogs became a thing, online communities popped up everywhere. It was definitely a more customer-centric era.
It felt like the power shifted from companies to individuals.
To some extent, yeah. But it's important to remember that even with all that user-generated content, it was still the big platform companies who were hosting it, collecting the data, and making the rules.
Right, companies like Facebook, Google, Amazon, they became the gatekeepers of the internet.
Exactly. And that brings us to Web 3, the latest iteration of the internet built on blockchain technology. It's still very much in development, but it's generating a lot of buzz.
Yeah, Web3 is all about decentralization. It's about giving creators and consumers more control, more ownership.
Exactly. It's about creating a more equitable and transparent online ecosystem.
So imagine a world where creators could earn money directly from their content without having to rely on these big platforms.
That's the idea. It's about cutting out the middleman and connecting directly with your audience.
That's pretty revolutionary. But how would that actually work?
Well, Web3 is powered by blockchain technology, and one of the things that makes blockchain so powerful is its ability to create digital scarcity. That's where NFTs come in.
NFTs, those digital tokens that everyone's talking about.
Exactly. Imagine a creator turning their content, a song, a video, a piece of art, into an NFT. Fans could then buy that NFT, giving them ownership of a unique piece of that creator's work.
So instead of just liking or sharing a piece of content, you could actually own it.
Exactly. It's a whole new way to support creators.
That's pretty cool. And the value of that NFT could go up as the creator becomes more popular, right?
Right. So it's not just about supporting the creator, it's also an investment. It's like owning a limited edition print or a rare record.
I can see how that would be appealing to collectors and superfans.
Mm-hmm.
But NFTs are just one aspect of Web3, right?
Oh, yeah, it's so much bigger than that. Web3 is about changing the whole dynamic between creators and their audiences.
How would that work?
Imagine online communities built around specific creators or interests. But these aren't just your typical Facebook groups. These are exclusive communities where members have real ownership and voting rights, where they can directly influence the direction of the community and even profit from its success.
That's pretty amazing. It sounds like a whole new level of fan engagement. But what about for the average internet user, the consumer? How does Web3 benefit them?
One of the biggest benefits is data ownership. Right now, in Web 2, our data is basically controlled by the big tech companies. They collect it, they use it to target us with ads, and they profit from it. In a Web 3 world, users would have much more control over their data.
So no more creepy, targeted ads that follow you around the internet.
Well, the idea is that users could choose to share their data with brands they trust and be compensated for it. It flips the script on the current data economy.
That's super empowering, giving individuals more control over their information and how it's used. So Web3 sounds pretty utopian, but it's still very early days, right?
It is, and there are definitely challenges to overcome. But the potential is huge.
It feels like we're on the verge of a whole new internet, one that's more equitable and user-centric.
I agree, and it's going to be really interesting to see how it all unfolds.
Speaking of interesting developments, let's talk about the rise of short-form video. It's like TikTok has taken over the world.
It really has, and it's not just TikTok. Short-form video is everywhere, from Instagram to YouTube to even Facebook.
It's like everyone's suddenly become a filmmaker.
Well, not everyone, but it's definitely become a dominant form of content, and it makes sense. It's perfectly suited to our fast-paced attention deficit world.
We've all got such short attention spans these days.
I know, it's like we need our information in bite-sized chunks. And short-form video is perfect for that. It's quick, it's easy to digest, and it's super engaging.
The source material calls it snackable content, which I think is the perfect description.
It really is, and it aligns with those little moments we all have throughout the day when we're scrolling through our phones, waiting in line, riding the bus, those micro moments.
Those micro moments are prime time for content marketers, right?
Exactly. And short-form video is the perfect way to capture attention in those moments.
The research also mentions that short-form video is particularly effective for reaching younger generations, like Gen Z and Alpha. They've grown up with the internet, and they're used to consuming content in this way.
And they're super savvy. They can spot a fake or inauthentic ad from a mile away.
So how do you create short-form videos that actually resonate with this audience?
Authenticity is key. Gen Z and Alpha value realness. They want to see content that feels genuine, not overly polished or corporate.
So ditch the marketing speak and just be yourself.
Exactly. Be playful, be experimental, have fun with it.
And speaking of fun, one of the things I found really interesting was the rise of shoppable content. The source material talks about how brands are integrating shopping directly into their short-form videos.
It's brilliant, isn't it? Imagine watching a video about a product you love and being able to buy it right then and there without even leaving the app.
No more switching back and forth between apps and websites.
Exactly. It's seamless, it's convenient, and it capitalizes on that impulse to buy something when you're already engaged with the content.
Makes sense. But this brings up an important question. As we get deeper into this world of personalized content and targeted marketing, how do we make sure we're respecting user privacy?
You're absolutely right. That's a crucial consideration. And the source material actually defines different types of data that marketers have access to: first party, second party, and third party.
It seems like first-party data, the info a company collects directly from its own users, feels the most transparent. But with third-party data, you don't really know where it came from or how it was collected.
You've hit the nail on the head. Transparency is key when it comes to data privacy. Consumers need to know what's being collected, how it's being used, and who it's being shared with.
And they should have the right to opt out if they're not comfortable with it.
Absolutely. Consumer control is paramount. But before we dive into those ethical considerations, maybe we should talk about some of the tools that marketers use to gather and analyze this data.
Sure. The source material mentions Google Analytics and Mixpanel. I've heard of Google Analytics. It's like the industry standard for understanding website traffic, right?
It is. It gives you all sorts of data about how people are using your website, where they're coming from, what pages they're visiting, how long they're staying.
So you can really see how people are interacting with your content.
Exactly. And that information can be super helpful for making decisions about your content strategy.
Like if you see that a particular blog post is really popular, you might want to create more content on that topic.
Right. Or if you notice that people are leaving your website at a certain point, you can figure out why and make changes to improve their experience.
It's all about using the data to optimize your content and make it more effective. Now, what about Mixpanel? How is that different?
Mixpanel is more focused on tracking specific actions that users take within your website or app. It's called event-based tracking.
So instead of just seeing what pages they visit, you're tracking things like button clicks or form submissions.
Exactly. You're tracking the actions that are most important to your business goals.
So Google Analytics gives you the big picture, while Mixpanel helps you zoom in on those key interactions.
That's a great way to put it. And then there are session replay tools.
Session replay, what's that?
It's pretty cool, actually. Session replay tools allow you to watch recordings of individual user sessions on your website.
Wait, so you can actually see how people are using your website?
You can. You can see their mouse movements, their clicks, their scrolls, everything.
I bet that's really useful for identifying usability issues.
It is. You can see exactly where people are getting stuck or frustrated, and you can use that information to make improvements.
That's amazing. But all this talk about tracking user behavior and collecting data makes me wonder how companies are actually using this information. Are they using it responsibly? Are they respecting user privacy?
That's a great question, and it's one we definitely need to address. Let's look at some real-world examples of how companies have used data to make decisions and how those decisions have impacted their users.
We were just talking about all these tools that marketers have to understand user behavior. It's pretty powerful stuff.
It is. But as they say, with great power comes great responsibility.
So true. So how can companies use all this data in a way that respects user privacy?
Well, the source material really hammers home the point that transparency is key.
Makes sense. People need to know what data is being collected about them, how it's being used, and who it's being shared with.
Exactly. It's about building trust. If companies are upfront about what they're doing and why, people are more likely to feel comfortable sharing their information.
And they should always have the option to say no, right?
Absolutely. Giving users control over their data is essential. And the source material also talks about the importance of explainable AI.
Yeah, what's that all about?
Well, it's all about making those algorithms more understandable to people. Like, we've all had that experience where an algorithm seems to know us a little too well, right? It can feel kind of creepy.
Yeah. Like, how does Facebook know? I was just talking about that new pair of shoes.
Exactly. But if we can understand how those decisions are being made, it can feel less invasive.
And of course, companies need to be following all the data privacy regulations, like GDPR and CCPA. Those are important safeguards for consumers.
Absolutely. Those regulations set clear standards for how data should be collected, used, and protected.
It seems like there's a lot to juggle. But I was reading that some people think all this focus on privacy might actually make marketing campaigns less effective. What do you think about that?
It's a valid point. I mean, there's no denying that personalized marketing can be really effective. When it's done well, it can feel like a brand really gets you, like they're speaking directly to your needs and interests.
But how do you find that balance? How do you personalize without being creepy?
That's the million-dollar question, and there's no easy answer. It really depends on a lot of factors: the industry, the type of data, the audience.
But some companies are figuring it out, right? Like finding ways to personalize while still respecting privacy.
Absolutely. The source material gives some great examples, like Unilever and Patagonia. They've actually shown that ethical marketing can be a really good thing for business.
So being a good guy can actually pay off.
It can. Consumers are becoming more aware of how their data is being used, and they're more likely to support companies that are doing the right thing.
It's almost like a new era of conscious consumerism.
I think you're right. People are voting with their wallets, and companies are starting to take notice.
So to wrap things up, what are some key takeaways for content marketers who are trying to navigate this whole data privacy landscape?
I think the biggest takeaway is that content marketing is still king, but the strategies are evolving.
Makes sense.
Marketers need to be adaptable, creative, and always thinking about their audience.
And they need to be super mindful of how they're using data.
Absolutely. It's about finding that sweet spot between leveraging powerful tools like AI and upholding ethical practices that build trust and respect.
So how do we do that? How do we move forward in a way that benefits both creators and consumers?
Well, the source material leaves us with a really thought-provoking question. With the rise of Web3 and this increased focus on data ownership, how will content marketing evolve?
It's a big question.
It is. But I think the answer lies in empowering both sides of the equation, giving creators more control over their work, and giving consumers more control over their data. If we can do that, I think the future of content marketing is really bright.
Well said. And there you have it, folks. We've explored the wild world of content marketing and data privacy, from the basics to the latest trends to the ethical challenges that are shaping the industry.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It has. We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive, and as always, thanks for listening.